Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3954. Yeah, 54. Today's date is March 21, 2026. It's been almost like a morning at 8:22 a.m. All right, let's just jump into the question. Let's go. All right. Okay. So the question is, what kind of human being and citizen should India's education system help shape by 2047, and our current reform align with a long-term national vision rather than short political cycle? Okay. The question is kind of like a bit more difficult. It's not really difficult. It's a like basically it's a kind of like a something the difficult way to kind of like ask the question and things and that, so that people might think that ki, okay, this kind of like a question is for legit people and things and that like it's a kind of like a thing that na ki, if you kind of like somebody cover up let's just say that ki, let's just say how are you, okay, like this is a kind of like a normal question, but instead of that you are kind of like a say this thing, oh, is it delightfully very beautiful? How do you think it would be? Like basically, just if you cover up the question with a kind of like a much more difficult words, then the entire the question would be kind of like a feel like, oh my god, this is a very legit thing and that and that. Okay, yeah, whatever. So this question is about a Indian education system. Okay, first of all, let me kind of like a clarify. I wanted to be Indian education minister. I'm not really sure when will I become, but I think I will become somewhere. Okay, yeah. And I need to like basically is this thing na ki, if I want to become a Indian education minister, I wanted to understand that ki, like a Indian education system, how it actually happened and things and that, before I am try to implement any kind of like a something ideas or things. I just need to understand how that education system is actually happening and things. Like basically behind the student books, there are in the political things. There are a lot of things that actually happen. I need to understand that thing. Okay, yeah. And for that understanding, I have to be asked question to myself, so that I would aware of everything what will gonna happen in the politics or things and that and that. And then I will kind of like implement my solution into this thing. Okay. So that's why I'm actually asking this kind of like a question to myself, to kind of like a somebody getting understand regarding about this Indian education system. Okay. Also is this thing that ki, the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right, is not exactly wrong either. It's a raw, it's unfiltered, it's just my opinion. And also is this thing that ki, like basically it's a raw, maybe my information is not exactly right. Okay, yeah. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I'm saying, or uh, do not seek for any kind of like information. It's just I am trying to understand this thing, and this is my way to kind of like understand that. I ask this question to myself, and I am kind of like try to understand if I understand the concept is much more better or not. Okay. By the way, the entire question is actually kind of like a on mobile phone. Okay, yeah. By the way, if you are kind of like a seeking how do I kind of like a get this question, so I simply is this thing, I went to ChatGPT kind of like a say this thing that okay, I want to become the education minister of India. I wanted to aware of everything regarding about things and that suggest me hundreds of questions, so that I would ask to myself, and so that I would kind of like a give my opinion, my answer would be that and that. ChatGPT kind of like a give me almost like hundreds of questions, and those hundreds of questions in the mobile phone, and I wrote this question in my book. Okay, yeah, this is the kind of like a question that I wrote. Okay, yeah. By the way, this is the book that I'm reading, How to Win and Influence People. It's a really good book. Highly recommend to you to read this book. Okay, yeah. So yeah, like basically I just feel like that it's a kind of like a very long shot. Okay, yeah, like most of my question are kind of like simply are for myself to kind of like improve myself much more better and things and that. But this question is a kind of like a bit more different. It's not about me, it's about that ki I will gonna change the entire system. And if I try to do this thing, it just like it adds so much amount of pressure and things and that. But you just think that now why am I kind of like doing this thing, why am I asking this question, why am I wanted to be a kind of like education minister of India, like why, like basically is this thing na ki, like okay, let me tell you one thing. Okay, I've been through very I realized that ki, okay, let me clarify. Okay, I've been kind of like educated twice. Okay, yeah. First is a conventional way of education that everyone does it. Go to the school, learn this, learn that, learn that, learn that. I try, I fail very miserably. Why? Because I am not that kind of like a particular person. Like I don't know. Okay, yeah. But whatever the information that I have till now is because of artifact. Yeah, like that is a one big thing. But also is this thing that na ki I see the world from different point of perspective and things and that. And when I see that perspective, I realize that what if my education system taught me this concept in this way, then I would understand that concept even much more better and things and that. Okay, yeah. Like basically it's this thing na ki my entire education system are actually based on textbook, a text. Like a simple example is this thing, if I'm say elephant, like you actually imagine as an elephant, but my education system kind of like simply letting me believe that ELEPHENT. Okay, yeah. So it's kind of like a things, and as also is this thing not me, like every human are kind of like a uh, built to grasp the information from visual point of perspective, not a kind of like a text point of perspective. Okay, yeah. And this is the one thing. Another thing is that key exam and things and that. I realize that key, like it's not a really good way to kind of like educate like that. Okay, yeah, because like even if we kind of like create such a education, then we would not gonna create the better human, because in the end those human are just being kind of like somebody not using knowledge for kind of like a make their life much more better and things and that. I already seen a lot of people who are kind of like a graduate in the engineering or things and that, but still their thought process are like a really fuck. Okay, yeah. Am I blaming my education system? Somewhat something, but I don't blame entirely on education system, because like basically mistake is actually happened both way, the person who learn from education system and the education system. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing na ki the question is that why am I kind of like doing this thing, is this thing na ki I kind of like found like this problem, and I think that now I could solve that problem. Okay, yeah. I still don't really have any kind of like a reason that why am I kind of like doing this thing. I still don't know why I wanted to be a education minister of India. Why I don't know. Literally, I don't know. Yeah, because I think now it's a kind of like some instincts are kind of like telling me that ask this question to myself, and that's why I'm actually asking this question. Like basically, this thing I am kind of like a try to not to ask this question to myself, but it just kind of like a something kind of like a poking me that ask this question, like something inside of me ask this question, and I don't know why. Just okay, let's just kind of like a give it a try and things like that. Let's just figure it out. And like what will gonna happen, it's an artifact episode, who will gonna believe and things and that. It just kind of like artifact is a kind of like a self-reflection process. Okay, yeah. It's not kind of like a things that keep I will gonna do. I'm not really sure. I am not, obviously, because I'm thinking so much way ahead of my life. Because right now I am living with my parents. I'm not really earning any money. I'm really pathetic and fuck. Okay, yeah. But I'm kind of like a thinking about being an education minister, changing the entire education system. It's just very, very long shot. Okay, yeah. And there is no kind of like a realistic path that I should supposed to be reach there and things and that and that. But still I'm asking this question is because of I don't know, I just wanted to. Okay, yeah. So that's what I'm actually asking. Alright. So let's just get it. Alright. So the question is, okay, yeah, I already kind of like almost like a spend almost like a 10 minute of kind of like a stupid nonsense stuff, but still. Okay, let's just ask question again. What kind of like a human being and citizen should India education system help to shape by 2047, and are the current reform align with the long term growth or just short political cycle? Let me explain this question in simple language. Okay, this question have a two question. Okay, first question is that what kind of like a product, means what kind of like a student should school and college create till 2047? Why 2047? Means it's a 100 year of independence, so 2047. Okay, and question number 2 is the current plan is actually working or it's just political gimmick? So let's just ask, like let's just kind of like a give the answer from question number first. Okay, question number first is that what kind of like a product or student should I supposed to be create till till the 2047? Okay, yeah. Now the question I have to be asked this thing that ki time. Okay, yeah. Like like what kind of like a somebody student like okay, like I'm not kind of like consider amount. I don't really consider the time. Okay, why? Because I'm not really sure about the time that when will gonna happen till 47 till 2047. I'm not really sure about that. Okay, yeah. But let's just ask this question that what kind of like a somebody student should I supposed to be create? Not till 10 to 40%, but what kind of like a student should I supposed to be create? Okay, yeah. The first thing is that ki let me kind of like a clarify what kind of like a somebody student should I supposed to be create. Okay. Okay. First of all is that ki what kind of like a student? It's a very hard question. Okay, what kind of like a student? Like I basically ask this question that ki if you became the education minister of India, what kind of like somebody student that how do you supposed to be shaped? Like what kind of like a somebody that you want? What kind of like a quality that you want from the student? I want a kind of like a two things. Okay, one thing is that ki observation and imagination. Okay, yeah. Okay, what is actually two things? What is actually observation and imagination? Okay. I'm telling from my point of perspective. Okay. When I see anything, let's just say this bird is actually kind of like a fly. Okay, yeah, rapidly. So basically this thing, when that bird fly very close to me and it kind of like a create some sound. Okay, sound. What sound? Loud sound means like that ki like when you fly, when you flip the kind of like some his things, he creates some sort of sound, a kind of like a ripple effect in the air and things, and we could kind of like see woo 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 woo. Okay, how am I kind of like listening this thing? How am I kind of like listening that the bird is not kind of like creating any kind of like a sound and things like that? Then how is actually kind of like a things? Is because of the kind of like a interaction between the kind of like their wings and the air. Okay, because air is a medium. Okay, yeah. And the birds are kind of like flipping the wings so rapidly that it kind of like create that whittle sound. Okay, whittle sound, because rapidly air molecules are a kind of like a move in between that flips, and that's why it kind of like somebody create that kind of like somebody that keep a shock wave, very tiny by the way, very tiny, and that shock wave could kind of like hear very close, like if that word is actually kind of like go very close by, then and only then I would kind of like see that particular shock wave. Okay, yeah. Now why am I kind of like telling this thing? Okay, yeah. I am telling this thing, this is because of that I seen from my point of perspective. Okay, yeah. Like basically this thing na ki if the birds are actually kind of like a cross by, I observe the bird, that how the bird is actually fly, things and that. Okay, yeah. And when it observe, I ask question to myself how the bird fly, how the wings are supposed to be kind of like create the lift, what is actually weight, how does like things and that. I ask this question and I try to give my answer to myself. Okay, yeah. This is what it is. Like if I'm trying to kind of like tell you from my point of perspective how I see the world, I observe things. I observe things regarding about that key, how the birds fly, how the trees are kind of like somebody looks green, or things and that. Okay, when I ask this question, I observe things. Okay, yeah. And obviously in the observation you just see the just a stupid tree, that's it. Okay, yeah. But when I try to imagine things, I imagine very vividly. Like basically, I imagine that okay, this is the sunlight is actually kind of like a somebody strike on the leaves. Leaves are kind of like a create the photosynthesis. In the photosynthesis, there are kind of like a bunch of molecules actually kind of like a go somewhere else. There is a kind of like in the photosynthesis, there is a kind of like a somebody that the the lot of kind of like a things actually happening. Okay, I'm not really sure what is actually happening. Might be something that kind of like a chlorophyll actually happened. Something that okay, yeah. And that chlorophyll kind of like a creates the food source, and that food source is kind of like a create this kind of like a, that's why it kind of like a create the food by in itself. That's why it kind of like a look green and things like that, because chlorophyll color is a green probably. I'm not really sure about that. It's became kind of like a creates its own food system, and because of its create the own food system, the entire food kind of like a some cycle is actually happened. Because why this kind of like a leaf is kind of like a green, the other animal kind of like a eat that green leaf, and they would kind of like a fill their stomach. Okay, and it's kind of like a somebody kind of like a support the life for another animal. Okay, yeah. Then that another animal actually killed by another animal, like basically lion or eagle or things like that. Then that animal would kind of like create the food source for those animal. Okay, yeah. Things and that. Okay, another thing is that there is a kind of like a microorganism who kind of like a somebody that survive on that another animal, kind of like somebody bird and fish. When they die, that bacteria kind of like evolve, and the bacteria have a kind of like a somebody that source of kind of like a somebody food source from that animal. As also is this thing, the plants and trees are also have a kind of like a bunch of animals and bacteria and things and that, which kind of like a somebody that support them, hold them life or whatever it is. Like basically is this thing na like I'm trying to tell you is this thing, this is how I imagine stuff. Okay, yeah. And that's what I mean, observe and imagine. Okay, yeah. And this is how I get the information. Obviously information is not right. Okay, the stuff that I'm exactly told you is not exactly right. Okay, yeah. Like basically it just creates a gaps. Like basically I don't know why the kind of like a plant look green. Maybe chlorophyll, maybe like a photosynthesis, I'm not really sure. Okay, yeah. But I ask this question, it creates the gap that I want to know. Okay, yeah. And that gap I will fill when I watch any kind of like a video or any kind of like a somebody gets a fly science video, kind of like a things that gap will gonna fill. But that gap will always be there. Okay, that gap called kind of like a somebody creates a enthusiastic regarding about knowing stuff. Okay, yeah. And this is I want to be student should supposed to be observe and imagine. Okay, yeah. Let's just say this is a kind of like a outdoor AC outdoor unit in front of me. How that AC outdoor unit is actually work? Like basically it's this thing that there is a kind of like a propeller who kind of like a suck the air inside of it. Okay, yeah. When it suck, obviously the air outside are kind of like a bit hotter, but there is a lot of kind of like a filter inside. That filter are kind of like a wet. Okay, yeah. Let me tell you one thing. When there is a air is actually come from the like a basically from the surface which is already wet, it kind of like a became kind of like a condensed in itself. When it became condensed, there is a multiple filter. It became multiple filter. It kind of like a somebody became a little bit of colder. Okay, yeah. When it became colder, that kind of like a whatever the air kind of like a suck inside the inside unit of AC unit, and it kind of like a blow that kind of like a air which kind of like a feel like a little bit of colder and things like that. Okay, yeah. So basically there is a condensation actually happened. The information is actually correct? Definitely not. Then why I'm kind of like saying this thing? It creates a gap. I try to understand how the kind of like a AC outdoor unit works and things and that. Obviously, is this thing that now when I try to imagine, in my imagination, the kind of like a somebody, the question is very much fiddle. The question is kind of like a that key, like a very not clear. The information that I have is very not clear. Okay. I just one thing I know that propeller kind of like a suck the air inside of it, or maybe suck the air outside of it. I'm not really sure, but probably something actually happened, that propeller things and that. It creates a gap. Okay, yeah, and I wanted to fill that gap after some time. Okay, yeah. I want that. Like basically says I want that thought process. I want that when the student who kind of like somebody, they would observe and imagine. Okay, yeah, because this is the kind of like a very important thing, because I seen, and there is a lot of evidence that a lot of the crazy amazing people who kind of like a do this two process, observe and imagine. Let's take a kind of like a Einstein observe that he kind of like a what if he would kind of like a travel at the speed of light. Then what kind of like a assembly the world that he wanna see and things and that. Now because of he kind of like imagine and observe and things and that, that's why we have kind of like a theory of relativity. That's why we have kind of like a space-time equation. That's why we have kind of like a E equal to mc square. Okay, same thing happened with the Leonardo kind of like a thinks about that ki why the birds fly, why the kind of like a, this mechanism system actually work, why the human look like human, like literally he kind of like a somebody cut out the entire human body part to understand the skeleton, muscles and things. He understand the entire autonomy regarding about the human skeleton, how it kind of like a look like that like that. Okay, yeah, he understand. And then he kind of like a, have the curiosity, he kind of like a put that imagination, and from that imagination he create the one of the beautiful painting called Mona Lisa. Because let's just see, when he draw the painting of Mona Lisa, he just not draw the kind of like a, how the skin looks and things and that. He understand that key when the Mona Lisa smile, what kind of like a muscle it kind of like a move. He imagine the muscle, he kind of like a see the skin beneath the Mona Lisa. He see the scene, he the see the muscles that okay, like he's smiling like that way because of that. Ki muscles kind of like a look that way. So if I do this thing, I draw that particular texture and things and that. Okay, yeah. Imagine he imagine her muscle like from her eyes, like literally. And when he imagine, he draw that painting. Okay, yeah. Same thing happened with the Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton kind of like most of people kind of like a thing that he was kind of like sitting on the kind of like apple tree fall on his head and things like that. But it's just like that. This is the only story that we know. But the another thing is that ki the Isaac Newton is kind of like understand that fact that ki how this kind of like apple fall, how is kind of like a thing, what kind of like a stuff put on the surface of the earth, what exactly is this force and things and that. He asks this question to himself, obviously creates the gap. Okay, because at that time gravitational force is not even introduced. Okay, so it creates that gap. Okay, yeah, like this is what I'm trying to tell you, that gap. Okay, that gap is kind of like a have a less information or not have the information. When it have not have the information, it creates the curiosity to want to know that what exactly is this thing that I don't know. Same thing happened with the Leonardo, same thing happened with the Einstein, same thing happened with the Isaac Newton. Every people who are kind of like a successful in its life, they understand that gap. Same thing happened with Elon Musk. Elon Musk understand why we are not making kind of like a rocket that is reusable. Okay, yeah, this question creates the gap, and that gap is actually filled, and we have SpaceX. This is what it is. This is what kind of like simply the imagination and observation works. The question is that ki what kind of like a student that I want from my education system. I want my student to imagine and observe. We are human. God gifted us of one of the beautiful thing is our mind. Okay, yeah. And we have to imagine that thing. We have to, like, I don't know, my education system is so fucked. They won't let us imagine, they won't let us ask question. Obviously they ask question, but in a kind of like a syllabus way, or the purpose of asking question to get a good marks. And marks are not like basically human credibility does not define by the percentage, does not define by the ABC grades, doesn't really at all. It defined by how much question that we ask ourselves, how much gap that we created inside our head. It creates curiosity, it creates that kind of like a things that I wanted to know, and that I want that. I want my kind of like somebody, my education system should supposed to be act like that way, that students supposed to be imagine things. Okay, yeah. It imagine and observe and imagine. Okay, yeah. But how do I supposed to do that? How do I kind of like do this thing? By kind of like let them reading a book. Okay, let me kind of like give you. I am 32 and I could able to be read this book. Okay, yeah. And I am consume information much more widely better. Why? Because I am 32. I am bit more mature enough. I understand the context of kind of like a reading a book, things and that. I kind of like held this habit inside of me. That's why I'm kind of like somebody reading this book and things and that. But let me tell you one thing. The students are not, because their age is kind of like a teenager, and in the teenage area, they don't really kind of like somebody convert that text into the visual. Why? Because they are not that evolved that much, because they are just a kind of like a human with how experience of almost like a 10 year or maybe kind of like somebody just 12 year, that's it. Okay, yeah. How do I supposed to be expect to kind of like a convert that text into the image? And mostly humans are kind of like a somebody consume information through visuals, not a text. Okay, yeah. So this is what I realized, that ki if I have to kind of like let the people imagine or observe, I have to kind of like visualize them. I have to kind of like tell them visualization. I have to explain every facts regarding about visualization, how the mathematics, why we do the trigonometry, why do we need to know about how, why do we need to know about the photosynthesis, and that and that and that and that. Okay, when I let them visualize, when I let them observe, when I let them imagine, they would ask question, they would create that gap, and that gap will kind of like let them to know more. It will create the curiosity in between them. What kind of like a student that I will gonna create, I am not really sure. Literally just like that, now I am not the particular person who is responsible for their future, but I will guide them to kind of like a better future. Obviously they would decide that what will gonna they do, and that and that and that, because every person is kind of like a different, every student is a kind of like a different. But if I guide them to the right direction, I would kind of like a create less wrong people. Okay, yeah, and more right people probably. Okay, I want it to be kind of like some people should supposed to be imagine things and that. So this is a kind of like something, my first answer, my first question answer is that ki what kind of like a product should school and college create. Product means school to student. I want my student should supposed to be imagine and observe. Like first of all observe. Observe is thing. Okay, observe. Okay, what is actually observation? Okay, go to the mall. Okay, yeah, and looked everything, like go to the kind of like a mall which has a kind of like a somebody dress, like you could buy the clothes and things like that. Okay, yeah, ask question. Have you ever kind of like find a place where you could sit over there? Or if you went to mall, have you ever found a place where you could sit like this, like I'm sitting on this stool? Okay, yeah. So have you ever found any stool or any chair that you could supposed to sit? It has, but very less. The mall is actually wanted to you to stand up all the time. Why? Why? Is because of that कि when you stand up, you walk na, and when you walk, you browse things. You browse. Okay, this is a new store. Okay, this is the MacD. This is the kind of like a pizza shop. This is the kind of like a clothing store. Things like that. When you stand up, it is very easy to move. It is very easy to browse stuff. Okay, yeah, they won't let you force to buy, but they won't let you sit, because when you sit, the possibility of going somewhere and kind of like a browse something is very less. So that's why they don't really have any stool or chair to kind of like a sit. And how do I know that? I observe that thing. Observe is very much essential. When you observe this thing, you ask question, and when you ask question, you understand. It creates the curiosity. When it creates the curiosity, you will find the answer by yourself. You don't really require any kind of like a Google or things and that and that. By the way, these are actually exist, like basically whatever the information that you want. Why the black hole is kind of like, I wanted to know the working of black hole and things like that, and you will get the entire information about the black hole, or maybe video and things you will find out. Okay, yeah, observe is very much essential. I want to people observe. Okay, yeah, when they master in observation, they have to be imagine. When they imagine things, they would imagine that how the actually work, how any kind of like a mechanism. You see the in your eyes that key. Okay, this is the AC outdoor unit. I see the propeller, I see the axial, I see the filter, I see this thing, I see the rivet, I see the body structure, I see there is an opening on the back, I see the kind of like a air inside it. I see that thing from my eyes, like basically a kind of like a it just dissemble by itself, and I just kind of like a see their thing. That is called imagination. Imagine things. I want that. Observe and imagination. This is the thing that I want. Question number 2. The question number 2 was that, is the current plan actually working or just a policies? Okay, yeah. Now this kind of like a question is actually about the kind of like Indian policy regarding about Indian Indian education system policy. Okay, yeah. They kind of like a cover up kind of like a lot of things, like a lot of kind of like some of the policy makers and things and that they might think that we should supposed to spend almost like a 6% of GDP of the kind of like education system and things and that, but they don't. Okay, why? Because like most of education minister are just a politician, they don't know about education system. Like basically this thing now, the everyone talk about how much impact our education system, but they don't really implement that. Why? Because let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah, education is the only field that can kind of like a give you result after very long period of time, after 20 fucking year, 20 साल बाद you will get the entire result. Indian politics system change after 5 year. Any policy would kind of like a survive for just a 5 year. There is another round actually came, that policy will gonna change. So there is no long-term vision growth and things and that. Why? Because the people who control that Indian education system are just a politics, are just a political things. Okay, yeah, and that's it. So basically, since their policies always change regarding about their education system, they just kind of like make sure that they would kind of like get the kind of like somebody just a education. They kind of like make sure that okay, we will kind of like make a school, we will kind of like provide the syllabus, we will kind of like provide the textbooks and things and that. They just want you to kind of like somebody just know stuff, that's it, or know stuff, or kind of like they just want you to kind of like learn and things, that's it. Okay, yeah, they won't kind of like ask you question regarding about your existence and things and that. Okay, yeah, that's why their policy always change regarding about every political system and that. Now what will I supposed to do? What kind of like a policy if I will kind of like became that particular person? Well, I'm not really sure about that, because I think that I think about as a kind of like somebody as a person point of perspective, that how do I supposed to give the information to the student, but the political point of perspective I don't know that. Why? Because I haven't really experienced, I don't know what exactly happening, I don't know what kind of like a game that they play and things like that. I know the result, but what kind of like stuff that they do, I'm not really sure. So talking about the policy at the moment, I'm not really sure about that. Okay, yeah, I will make sure my policy will intact to kind of like let the people would kind of like imagine and observe and things and that. But what do I supposed to do with the policy? This answer I don't know at the moment, because it's just a lot of things. Because if I still became a kind of like education minister of India, at this moment I don't know what kind of like a politics should I supposed to play on that context. Obviously is this thing I have to be teach the student and things and that, but in the political thing there is a lot of stuff actually happen and I don't know that. But still, whatever the policy that I would have, I would have my policy for long-term vision growth, and as well as I'm focused on kind of like simply the imagination and observation. These are the kind of like two things that I want from my education system. All right, this is it. I should supposed to end here, and thank you.